Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Emily Aldrich and I'm the museum educator here at the Southern Ohio Museum and Cultural Center. So this is our latest installment of our 2022 Prehistory lecture series. So I have to thank all of our sponsors that made this possible. So we'll have to thank the Scioto Foundation and the Ohio Arts Council, the Ohio Humanities, and then we also have to thank the Arc of Appalachia for helping us with advertising this program and being so supportive, especially of the tour that's going to be happening later today. So I also have to thank all of our presenters in the lecture series for also being so generous with their time and making this possible. So I have to thank Dr. Kurt Shoemaker, Professor of Geology at Shawnee State University, for kicking off our lecture series. I have to thank Dr. Jeb Bowen, who is a professional archaeologist and the resident archaeologist at the Clark May Museum of the Pickaway County Historical Society. And then we have to thank Dr. Andrew Feight for today's lecture. And then I also encourage you all to join us in less than 2 weeks on September 29th. Jeffrey Wilson will be here talking. So Jeffrey Wilson is the president of Friends of Serpent Mound, and he's also an amazing researcher. So what he has done, so in the 1848, the Smithsonian Institution put out a book called Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. So some of the earliest surveys of the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex were in that book, along with a lot of other mounds and prehistoric Native American earth constructions around the country. But Jeffrey Wilson has tracked down the source surveys, the source material that was used to create that book, and he's going to be presenting the portion of those that he found that are connected with the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex. So because this is the largest prehistoric earth and mound complex in the world, there are more maps associated with the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex than anywhere else. So we're really excited for that to happen. That'll be Thursday at 6 p.m. on September 29th. And then our final lecture will be in November, and that'll be Dr. Jared Burks, who's going to be coming and talking with us about the geophysical survey at the Tremper Mound. So today is our launch party for the Scioto Historical Lab version 4.0, and we're really excited to have Dr. Andrew Feight here, who is a professor of history at Shawnee State University and is also the director for the Center of Public History at Shawnee State University. And he has put together an amazing program today. So for those of you that would like to, you're welcome to join us after this section of the presentation. We're also going to be touring the remaining portion of Portsmouth Group B at Mound Park. We're going to be checking out Tremper Mound, and then we are also going to be doing a picnic lunch at Riverside Park. So those of you that were not able to come to the Raven Rock hike portion, if you want to bring a picnic lunch and join us, you're certainly welcome to do that as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Feight. Thank you, guys.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out on this very nice Saturday morning. I want to also acknowledge a lot of people. This has been a pretty big project, and I couldn't have done it without all the help that I got. So I do want to start with, of course, recognizing Shawnee State University, the Center for Public History, of which I'm the director. They're really the ones that are spearheading all this. And we had assistance from the Shawnee Development Foundation, the Office of the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, the College of Arts and Sciences, and of course the students at Shawnee State University, who are a really important part of the development of the content that goes into this project called Scioto Historical. And I need to also mention that we had additional grant funding that really made this update to the project possible from the Ohio Humanities. So a big thank you to the Ohio Humanities, which is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I also want to thank community partners. So of course the Southern Ohio Museum and Cultural Center. Again, this wouldn't be possible without them. The Arc of Appalachia, the City of Portsmouth, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the Portsmouth Public Library's Local History Department. I also want to give a shout out to. And then what we're going to see here is a 3D simulation in just a little bit of the earthwork complex. So I want to recognize Herb Rowe, who was the artist behind the 3D simulation. Michael Barnhart, who provided the music composition for the video, T.R. Beery, who did the editing for the video. And then we have photography for the project from Vaughn Waskovich, Ryan Prose, Lacey Davis, and I also want to mention some of the authors that contributed as well. That's Nancy Stranahan and Andrew Sewell. And then special thanks to Vernon Teach, Emily Aldrich, Jenny Richards, Brad Lepper, Jeffrey Wilson, and Matt Davidson, who advised on the project. So what is Scioto Historical? It's a mobile app. It's an educational mobile app, a free educational mobile app that explores the history, and now you can say the prehistory of the Portsmouth area and the surrounding region. It provides the community and the broader public with professionally curated virtual historical markers that are stitched together into tours. And these tours can be completely virtual. You can do them on your desktop computer, on your iPad, or on your phone. So there's a website, sciotohistorical.org, but everything that's on the website is also in the mobile app. So you can download a mobile app to access all the content as well. So the website and the app include image galleries, and so what this allows you to do is to visit, a historical site, in this case, an earthworks site, pull up the content, look at the image gallery, and actually look at artifacts and historical maps, and the video that we're going to see here is all going to be accessible. So you could be out at Mount Park, and you can pull up the video, you can pull up the gallery, and be at Trimble Mound, do the same thing, Raven Rock, and be able to access all those on your phone while you're there. So that's the vision, and I think we've executed it, and I look forward to demonstrating it with you guys today. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to promote, I'm sorry about this, issue here. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is promote local history, historic preservation, but also cultural heritage tourism. Both for us, the people that live here inside the county, in Portsmouth, in the region, but also to attract people from outside the region when they visit Portsmouth and inside the county. It also allows for classroom adoption, so we're using the classrooms at Shawnee State, and it's also being used in some high schools through the College Credit Plus program that we are running at Shawnee State. And this is actually saving Ohio families and students textbook money because this is a free open educational resource that students are able to tap into. Okay, so far we have over 90 markers to date. We first started developing Scioto Historical back in 2013, so this has been in the works for a while, and I think it's important to know that it is a constantly ongoing project, right? It's a long-term project where we're going to be constantly adding new content. And that's also the case for the Earthworks Tour. So as we'll see today, that the Earthworks Tour focuses on the Ohio parts, components of this larger Portsmouth Earthworks Complex. And we have hopes and plans to develop a second phase where we'll be working with people of Kentucky and the owners of the sites in Kentucky to ultimately provide the same sort of treatment that we're doing for Ohio for the Kentucky side of the project. I should note that the development of this tour is one of 6 new tours actually that we're launching and developing this fall. So stay tuned. We have a new Underground Railroad tour that is launching on the 22nd of September, which is Emancipation Day. So as part of the community celebration of Emancipation Day, the anniversary of Lincoln's announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation, we're going to be launching the Underground Railroad tour. And then coming up, we would also have, I need to change my setting here. Apologize about this. But coming up, we have a tour of the Ohio Little Smokies, so that's the forest region, and Jenny Richards and I are going to be hosting that launch event. That's on the Thursday, the 8th of October. There's also a new walking tour of the Bony Fiddle District. That launches later in October, October 22nd. And there's a Civil Rights Movement tour, looking at the history of the Civil Rights Movement here in Portsmouth. That launches on the 3rd of November. And then the finale, we're going to cap it all off with, is a new pro football tour of the history of the Portsmouth Spartans, who of course went on to become the Detroit Lions. So we got a lot of new content coming your way, and this is really just the launch of it. And then going forward, we'll be continuing to add content. Okay, so part of the grant that we got from Ohio Humanities involved the creation of some tour posters. These were hand printed by Bloody Twin Press here in Scioto County. The artwork was done by Herb Rowe, who did the video that we're going to see here. And then the layout of the posters was done by Darren Baker. So those are going to be on sale, and they're like a fundraiser for the project. So if you guys are interested, you can check it out. The posters out there by the front desk of the museum, and they are for sale for $25. So check that out. Okay, so how do you use Scioto Historical? Like I said, it's both a website and a standalone app. So if you go to sciotohistorical.org on your browser, you can pull it up and interact with it that way. But you also can download it to your iPhone or to your mobile device. So all the content is essentially the same, it's just slightly different interface. But what it allows for is a classroom adoption using your computer in the classroom, not having everybody on their phones in the classroom, right? So you're able to actually, the instructor can use it to guide virtual field trips. So there is a card up there in the door when you come in. There is a QR code here. You can take your phone and snap a photo of the QR code. It will take you to the website. And then there's links there that will take you to the iPhone store or the Google App Store. So just real quick, I'll show you a little bit around the website. So each of the tours, there's a map that you can interact with the map, and zoom in and so forth to figure out where these things are. So we are, let's see, this is us right here. Art of the Ancients exhibition at the Southern Ohio Museum. Now there's a tour description if you're to read this, the text here. You can also access them down here. So just to quickly show you this. So there's an entry, a short little entry about the exhibition, and then there are photos of the exhibition. There's a link to the video that we're going to watch here in just a minute. And so these are photographs by Vaughn Waskovich, who teaches photography at Texas A&M down in Texas, but he's an Ohio native and has a lot of interest in the area. Has been photographing the area for the past couple decades. And so you can click on this, and you have this is the image gallery. And so for those who maybe remember William Wertz or Will Wertz, there he is with the collection when it was housed in his basement, I believe, before his death and his donation by his wife Madeline to the Southern Ohio Museum. We're just gonna go through here. So hopefully, people will see these photographs and say, you know what, I want to go there in person, I want to take a closer look at these things, and now they have a better idea of what is here. And since this is part of a tour, you can click on the next item. And this takes you to the Waller Heinisch Mound. This mound was located where Portsmouth High School is. This story then is about the excavation and its destruction. Again, you can access the video. A lot of our information actually about the Waller Heinisch Mound and what was in it, what was found, comes from Clara Waller, who in the 1890s published an essay in the Portsmouth, like a special issue called, what is it? It's not listed there, but it's the Ladies' Industrial Review. So it was a special issue put out by the Portsmouth Daily Times that was edited and written by women in Portsmouth. So a very interesting document. And then within that, we have Waller's essay. And that's where a lot of our information comes from about it. But also, William Wertz's father, Charles Wertz, he was there when it was leveled and excavated back in the 1880s. And he left an account as well. So we have Clara Waller's account and Charles Wertz's account, and that's how we have a good idea of what was there. I'd also note that a lot of the items that were in the Waller Heinisch Mound, some 88 items, ended up in Columbus at the Ohio Historical, it's now the Historical Connection. And currently they are not allowing the display of any items from the Heinisch Mound because they're what they consider mortuary goods or items of great cultural historical significance. The biggest one I think we could have to cover things with. But I'm hopeful that going forward in the future, once they have finished implementing or developing a new Native American collections policy, that we'll be able to add some of these artifacts to the project. But currently what we have are the items that are in the Wertz collection. So this is an example of one of the items that comes from the Wertz collection. This is a large canned granite adze, again with the provenance in the Waller Heinisch Mound. So maybe that gives you a quick little sense of how it works. I'll show this. This is a new aerial view that was done by Herb Rowe, who created the video that we want to see. So this is derived ultimately from his 3D simulation.
Can you point out anything on there?
Sure. So this is where Mound Park is located. Okay. This is the Bony Fiddle area of Portsmouth. This is the Waller Heinisch Mound where PHS is located. You can see that this is different from the mouth of the Scioto River today because that is actually the historic the original mouth of the Scioto River is actually over here. Today it just cuts right through there. So that's why it might be a little confusing. You might not recognize it, but this, this is Portsmouth, Ohio, right here. This is New Boston. And this is known as the Old Fort. This is known as the Temple Mound. This is known as Group D, or the big site. And Trimper Mound is not in the image, but Trimper Mound is over here.
Drew,
Yes.
what's the correlation to the mound that's on the Kentucky side? Like, where is that? Is that like South Shore?
Temple Mound Silo.
This is Siloam. If you know where Hardin's greenhouse is, it's in the proximity to that. I'll put it that way. This is I don't know what that's technically called.
Shinola, well, they got the sign on the highway that says Shinola.
Right, right. So over on the Kentucky side, if you hang a
Just
right.
down- Yeah, just down from the bridge.
Okay. And so the next stop on the tour will be Mountain Park. And we have some new illustrations done by Herb Rowe as well for that, as well as artifacts from the Wertz collection here at the Southern Ohio Museum that are going to be in the down here, a little bit longer of an entry. And here you can look at old maps of the earthworks. So this is the original, oldest of the maps done by Caleb Atwater back in 1820. This is a large canvas mural panel that was done about 1850. It's on display out in St. Louis at the St. Louis Art Museum. But it was like a crank. They would crank it. It was like a display that you would have like in a theater like this, right? But there'd be somebody over there cranking it, and it would go all the way down the Ohio River, showing different locations. And so this is a vision of what the earthworks looked like about 1840 maybe. But the design of the earthworks is largely influenced by Caleb Atwater's map. So you can kind of see Caleb Atwater's map as the basis of this. 1833, this is really the first real serious topo map of the confluence of the Ohio and Cider River. And so this is by Francis Cleveland, who was the engineer for the southern part of the Ohio Erie Canal. So he was a surveyor, engineer, and he created this map, and it included the first real detailed look at what we call Group B, or what is in Mountain Park today, the twin horseshoe maps. You can see a similar design in what is referred to as Squire and Davis and their map, which was published in 1848. And Chris Llewellyn took the Squire and Davis map and then overlaid it over a Google image to give you a sense roughly of the scale and the location, according to Squire and Davis, of the Group B earthworks. So one of the things I want to point out that we're fixing, there was an error in the map that was done by Squire and Davis. The parallel embankments going to the southeast, they had them crossing just across the river like this. Turns out that the Temple Mound and the parallel lines are actually over here. And this is another map. This is known as Hempstead's map. GSD Hempstead, a local doctor, expert, collector in the 19th century. And again, you can see the twin horseshoe mounds there at the center. And then again, this is Herb Rowe's vision. So if you take John Egan's from like the 1850s, this is sort of the present day version of that. Taking all the maps that we have at this point in time, locating them using an accurate topo map, and then digitally painting the structures and everything onto that topo map. So one of the mounds that is included in Group E is called the Lawson Mound. It's not in Mound Park today. It's been destroyed. It was east of Mound Park. But there are artifacts from this mound that are in the Wertz collection, and it's really part of that same central complex there at Mound Park. And so these are some of the artifacts that you can see from the Wertz collection that came out of the Lawson Mound.
I see it's copper.
Yeah, so this would be a copper ornament of some sort, maybe a crescent. It's not, you really don't know. There's so much mystery with all this. It's one thing you can count on is that you probably don't know if you have the question. There's a lot of speculation. This is a perforated stone hammer. So that hole actually is drilled all the way through it. Okay, so it's shaped like a pentagon. And just a nice. I'm going to ask.
Sand and reed. They can take a reed and put sand in a hole and spin the reed, and little by little the sand will leak through it.
Mm-hmm. So it'll probably take a long time.
Yes.
Yep. So a little history on Mount Park. The county originally, well not originally, it was owned by like a private farmer, but the county ultimately got control of it, and they built an infirmary there. Later, when the infirmary was moved out here to the west side, they turned it into a children's home. They built this new children's home in Mount Park. If you're familiar with Mount Park today, that is where the park shelter building is located. That is where the children's home was. And when they were constructing the children's home, they dug a basement or for the foundation. They dug 4 feet down and they found all kinds of stuff. Anyways, you should read the article that talks about it. But, I'm not going to give away everything, but this is a diagram that was published of that excavation, and you'll see that they speculated that there was a channel for blood. That is because at sea they found a clay circular altar, and then that line from C to E was a clay braided way, is how I described it, but basically clay that was leading off from there. So, I don't necessarily believe that it was, I don't believe that it was a channel for blood, but one of the things when you get into the history of all this is really the history of archaeology, the history of our changing interpretations. And this is one of the things that I work with my students on, is that for a very long time there was this notion of a lost race that built these mounds and earthworks, that they were not the work of Native Americans, indigenous people of North America. Rather, it was some lost white race, or maybe it was ancient Hebrews or Romans or Celtic peoples, all kinds of different theories, anything but crediting Native Americans with that, right? So, what happens by the time you get to like the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, the scientific community and archaeology has matured in the United States, become much more professional, and you have a growing consensus that it was indeed Native Americans that built the mounds and earthworks, and that their descendants were modern Native Americans that we know today. Portsmouth has a history of trying to promote and save the earthworks. You can say that, I wish we could have done a better job saving them, because so much of them were destroyed. But this is from well, I don't have the date on there, but I want to say it was like in the 1920s, about 1927 thereabouts. And this is Kiwanis, and they placed they call it a tablet, with a sign right there in front of the horseshoe, is where they're standing.
I wonder where that is.
Yep. Okay. So you might recognize this from some of the promotional material that we have for today. This is a dark slate two-hole gorget. Exactly what these were used for is debated, but it's believed as sort of like a neck piece, maybe something that might have been worn around the neck. That's why they use the term gorget. But it's some sort of ornamental decorative piece. And then this is what's being called a banner stone, another sort of somewhat mysterious type of object that this one's somewhat unique because of its shape, but banner stones are fairly, I won't say common, but there are many examples of banner stones that are out there. But this one is, I think, fairly unique because of its horned design, and also suggests that it's more ceremonial and wasn't sort of utilitarian from its design. A very interesting copper piece that also has a provenance in Mount Park. So, anyways, download the app, check it out on the website. You can see even more of these items. Okay. And then speed this up here a little bit, but then next in the tour will be Trimper Mound. And Herb Rowe is commissioned to also do a 2D image of Trimper Mound. So that's his artwork there as well. Down here in the gallery. So that's the Scioto River in the background there, and you're basically looking in the direction of Portsmouth. And for scale, Herb placed 4 humans right there. So you can get a size of how large Trimper Mound was. So back in 1915 is when Trimper Mound was excavated by William Mills, who was working for the Ohio Archaeological and Historical Society, which is today's Ohio History Connection. And from the excavation immediately, they were, their minds were being blown, you could say, by what they were finding there, and it ended up in the Portsmouth Times. This is the first and oldest published survey of Trimper Mound, done by Charles Whittlesey. It ultimately was published by Squire and Davis in their book in 1848. It actually predates that from the survey. But it was because of his survey that people came to believe that it was an effigy. So effigy mounds in Ohio are really pretty rare. Okay. So there is, of course, Serpent Mound. And at the time, Serpent Mound was the other effigy mound in the region. So Trimper was sort of celebrated and known for being an effigy mound for much of its early history in the sense of American history. That would change with the 1950 excavation because when they removed all the dirt of the mound, what they found at the base level, at the ground level, were post holes that indicated what is known as a great house. A funerary site. This is a LiDAR map showing you that it does show up using the LiDAR technology. But this is the floor plan that was discovered. I mean, they didn't discover the floor, they discovered the holes. This is what was published by Mills. And Mills then argued that it was not an effigy its shape was a result of the floor plan of the structure that was buried underneath them. But I say that people still debate this. And
Well, I
maybe
think
for
we-
good reason, because if you look at it, even though it does largely follow the outlines, clearly they added what you could call legs or feet to it. But again, it's debated, it's still debated whether this is the effigy, because if it is an effigy, what animal is that exactly? For the, well, one thing that they were able to tell from Mills's excavation was that they burned the structure before it was covered. So there was charred remains of some of the timbers. And some of the timbers, the posts were, I mean, they completely exterior the lawn, so you just had different colored dirt in those holes. But they did find some of the timbers were like laying down and had fallen over and were charred. So they were charred remains. So, the general speculation is that it was a major mortuary site, because what you found were crematoriums, and we had these basins that held hundreds of remains, of ashes, but also artifacts and so forth that were left with the ashes. Maybe hundreds of remains in each of these.
I think they determined it went on for hundreds of years.
Yes.
This was not, this
Right.
500 to 700 years they were burying leaders or rulers or everything.
Right. So it probably started out much smaller, they added to it.
And they buried one,
Right.
burned it down, and then they do another one,
Right.
and another one, and over
Right.
hundreds of years,
Right.
it ended up a big,
Right.
big complex.
And so here it is today. The Ark of Appalachia has recently acquired this property, and we're in the process of preparing it for being open to the public, which will happen sometime in this coming year in 2023. But for today, they're having a special open house for us, for those who are going to come with us on this tour. They have done what's called, I love this phrase, interpretive mowing. They have done some interpretive mowing for us so that you can enjoy and actually get a sense of the shape of the mound and the enclosure around it. So Trimper Mound is named for Dr. Trimper, and just a quick little bit on him. He was a dentist, and he was a native of New Richmond, Ohio. But after he got his medical degree, he ultimately settled in Portsmouth and opened up a practice. He, at some point, acquired the property upon which Trimper Mound is located, and he was active in Republican Party politics. He got elected to the Ohio Senate, so he represented Southern Ohio, Scioto County in the Ohio Senate. In fact, he was a senator at the time of the dig in 1950. And the reason why we call it Trimper Mound is because of when the dig happened, he was supposed to happen to be the owner. So, and oftentimes, that's exactly how the names of these mounds come from. They come from the owner of the mound at the time that they were explored, open, reading.
All the above.
All the above. And so some of the items from Trimper did end up in the Wertz collection, and Charles Wertz helped out on the dig with William C. Mills and Chatrone, who was the assistant to Mills. And so some of the items were gifted by Dr. Trimper to Charles Wertz, and so they ended up in the collection. But the overwhelming majority of all the artifacts that came out of Trimper ended up in Columbus. Again, the same situation. They are currently not authorizing the display of any of the Trimper Mountain artifacts. And we're hopeful that once they finish implementing the policy, that we'll be able to include those images here. But currently, we're not able to do that. Now, these are some of the items, again, from the Wertz collection that come from Trimper. This is another one of those banner stones that we talked about before, another one that is clearly ceremonial. And in the Wertz collection, there is a pipe, and of course, Trimper is known for its pipes, perhaps known specifically for their effigy pipes that were carved in the shape of many different species of animals that live here. So like there's Carolina parakeet, for example, which is extinct, but you can find a Carolina parakeet effigy pipe. Okay? So we're hopeful, and like I was saying, this is a multi-year project that's continuing consultation with the Ohio History Connection that will ultimately be able to include some of those images with their permission. You also find some copper at Trimper too, so you can see how these places are connected with the materials. And copper, right, doesn't come from Southern County, so this points to what they call the Hopewell interaction sphere, which is one way of talking about a large trade network that ultimately the Hopewell had, where they accessed exotic materials from afar, brought them here, and used them in the creation of various different ornaments and other types of ceremonial pieces. So this is again a celt made from copper found at Trimper. And this is another example, also a beautiful example of a birdstone. And this birdstone is actually in a museum in Baltimore. They have one item from the Trimper Mountain in their museum at the Walters Museum in Baltimore. So exactly how it ended up there, I don't know. But they are allowing folks to display images from their collection. All right. So I think there's one last stop, and I'm going to wrap it up. And so the last stop of the tour is Raven Rock Nature Preserve. This is operated by the Department of Natural Resources. And access to Raven Rock is by permit only. So it's a free permit. You just go to their website to you can look up Raven Rock Nature Preserve, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and you can get a permit. But we have a special permit today for 30 people, and that's why we had to have a registration for that part of the program. But Raven Rock is really just an incredible special place, and it gives you perspective on a large part of the complex, actually. And I would suggest that's one reason why it also is a prehistoric site. So you had the lookout, right? And this is the view from Raven Rock. But there also was, until it was destroyed, there was a large mound that was made of rock. So to separate it from earthen mound is referred to as a stone cairn. But there's the Raven Rock Stone Cairn that was located on the hill directly back from the overlook. And items that were taken from the rock cairn when it was excavated, some of the items did end up in the Wertz collection. It's not completely clear how they ended up in the Wertz collection. There were perhaps 2 different excavations, and probably more than that, of people just digging in it. There's an account of like the first exploration of it that comes down to us from Charles Wertz. And what Wertz relates is that when it was originally opened up back in the 19th century, and they pulled the rocks out and went down to the middle of it, at the base, they found a burial chamber with some skeletons, but also a large number of other artifacts, including a pipe that was shaped like a bird. And the story that was then told is that is why it's called a rock, because the bird pipe is actually a breathing pipe. Now, if you've been here in Portsmouth, in the area long enough, you'll probably say, well, I heard a different story. Why it's called Raven Rock? Because there are a number of different stories as to why it's called Raven Rock. But I've come around to thinking that it goes back to the pioneers who found a raven effigy pipe when they first went into the mountain for the cairn. So, it's been a popular place for people to visit going back to pioneer times. This is from a postcard collection at the Portsmouth Public Library. And there's all kinds of myth and lore. There's one story that Daniel Boone, in this postcard, calls it Daniel Boone's Lookout. There's even a story out there that Daniel Boone escaped from the Indians by jumping off Raven Rock, which is absolutely not true. But yeah, people love to get their photograph made at Raven Rock and so forth. So for those who go up there today, we'll snap some photos. Continue the tradition. There's a really nice mural that captures Raven Rock at the lodge, so at Shawnee State Park. And these are some of the items that were found at Raven Rock at the rock cairn that are in the Wertz collection. And these are described as leaf-shaped flint blades.
16 feet underground, Charles would say.
Yeah, so the cairn was about 15, 16 feet tall originally, or at least, according to Wertz's account. And that they went down 15 feet, and that's when they hit the burial chamber. And they speculated the burial chamber was constructed out of wood timbers, and that those had decayed, and then the rocks had crushed and pushed down and crushed a lot of the objects and the skeletons that were down below it. So these blades were all found, together, like in call it cache. So this is a fantastic photograph of a historic moment when Charlie Brown, the man in the bow tie, signed over Raven Rock to the state of Ohio. And part of the stipulation that came with that was that you had to have a permit in order to make sure that that it was respected and so forth. So it's another reason why it's so preserved. So there's extra protection for Raven Rock and ultimately for the prehistoric locations that are also up there. It's also an amazing geological location. So there is one of the few natural arches in Ohio up there at Raven Rock as well. And of course, graffiti, right? Inscriptions and so forth. This is a photograph that Eli Allen took and he transcribed it for us. I'll read it to you. It says, "Could man behold what thou hast seen, unfold the shrouded past? I am all that is to what has been in birth of time, the rise, the fall of empires, myriads, ages, flown, things, cities, tongues, arts, worships, all whose echoes are not yet gone." So maybe you might hear a faint echo when we're up
Well,
there.
that's 1894,
Yeah.
See that?
He transcribed it as actually 1844.
Whatever.
It does look like a 9, but yeah,
The
yeah.
graffiti was way back.
Oh yeah.
It's beautiful down now.
All right.
Oh wait, if you're engineering,
Mm-hmm.
can you go over again what a cairn is and like where that was in relation to the cliff? Because I can't.
Sure. So, in the descriptions of the mound, we'll call it a mound here first. The mound that was on top of Raven Rock Hill. Okay. If you're at the overlook and you're looking out, if you turn directly behind you and go north, you go just directly north of the lookout, there's like a little bit of a hill back in there, and that's where it is. But that's off the path. So, and in the preserve, you can't go off the path. Okay, so what a rock cairn is, right, is that it's a stack of rocks into a conical shape, typically. So it would be made up of rock and earth, dirt, but mostly rock. And the rock cairn at Raven Rock, according to the description, was that it was leveled off at the top. And there, the rock was had evidence of being burned for a really long time. And so it's believed that it was also maybe a signal fire location. So if you can imagine like a big rock cairn, 15 feet tall with a flat top and a fire burning on top of it. Okay, that would be according to the descriptions of it.
Well,
That's all that we had to go on.
And supposedly they had fires on tops of hills all the way up to where the ceremonial complexes were.
Right. And if you go up the valley, the side of the valley, you go like in Lucasville,
All the way.
and all the way up to there are what are believed to be signal fire locations going up the valley, and then also in the Ohio Valley going down maybe up both ways. So.
You know, if they were gonna have a giant celebration and they had people coming in from far away, that would kind of light the way.
So, I think maybe I'll wrap it up at this point, but I'm going to just say this about the tour. It is by caravan, so we don't have vehicles to transport folks. So if you do want to come with us, you are going to have to drive yourself. But after Emily gives a little talk about the gallery upstairs, we're going to head to Mountain Park, so that would be our first stop. And so with that, I'll just say I'm happy to take questions as we're out and about, but we need to get rolling here. Emily, do you want to
Are you
say?
going to show us the flyover?
Oh
That's
That's why you're here, right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay. All right, here we go. So,
You're eager.
We're leaving.
all right, you hit play. This is it. Alright, so that video is loaded into the app and it's loaded onto the website. We're also releasing it on YouTube, so it's out there in the world now. But you'll visit his locations and use the app, and you can watch that while you're streaming. Thank you, everybody. Anyone you have a few words to say? How we doing right now?
I'll be brief. The original plan was to go up and have a gallery talk, but I'm so pleased that there's so many of you here that we would have trouble fitting into the gallery. So I just want to give a few brief words about the significance of the Wertz collection and the Art of the Ancients permanent exhibition here at the Southern Ohio Museum and Cultural Center. So the Wertz collection is over 10,000 prehistoric Native American objects, largely from the mound builders, and the significance of it being here and being in place is pretty amazing. So Charles Wertz was the father, so his father and son that collected this body of work. And Charles Wertz was alive in the late 1800s when they first started excavating and exploring these mounds. And at the time when Charles Wertz was born and growing up, the U.S. government was still waging war with Native Americans across the western frontier. So people didn't really care about this material. So if you think about it, like if your grandpa was killed by the Indians, maybe you don't really feel like you want to keep around some of their objects and artifacts. So a lot of the attitude of people was that these were items that just weren't very important or significant or worth keeping around. So to put this in context, they found a similar cache of effigy pipes like they found at Tremper Mound, they found at Mound City in 1847, and those became part of the Davis, of Squire Davis's collection. So he at one point decided to sell his collection. He offered it to anyone in the whole state of Ohio that wanted it. Nobody wanted it. So he put it up for sale to anyone in the entire country. No one in the United States of America thought that those pipes were important. So those pipes are now on display at the British Museum in London. So you can fly to London and you can go and look at them. So that kind of tells you the attitude that people had toward this material. So Charles Wertz was fascinated by Native American culture, and he collected this material. He was also present at the excavations when the state of Ohio came down and started excavating these mounds. And then he also had a real estate company. So part of the story of the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex is its partial destruction. So during the development of Portsmouth, the large majority of the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex was completely demolished. But as they were constructing the town, Charles Wertz was also a real estate agent and a builder. And so as they were excavating basements and foundations for houses in Portsmouth, that's where a lot of these objects came from. So what's pretty amazing is that both Charles Wertz and then his son Bill Wertz, who took up his love for artifact collecting, kept this collection not only together but in place. They felt it was important for it to stay here in Portsmouth so that people could appreciate the cultural heritage that we have here in the area. And so this was so important to Charles Wertz that he actually donated his portion of the collection to the city of Portsmouth in 1926. The city of Portsmouth entered into an agreement with the public library here in Portsmouth, and the public library put those items on display for free for the public for many years. In the 1960s, the library decided they needed more room for their collection. Charles Wertz was also clever enough to put in the gift to the city of Portsmouth that if they ever decided that they didn't want to display it, that would go back to him or his heirs. And so at that point in the 1960s, the Portsmouth Public Library gave Charles Wertz's collection back to Bill Wertz. And Bill Wertz kept it in his house for many years, and he and Madeline decided that it would be best to, again, place it on public display for free so people could come and look at it, and that's how it ended up here at the Southern Ohio Museum. So we now have the display of the largest collection of prehistoric Native American materials in the entire region, and it's on display for the public upstairs all the time. And so we are open Tuesday through Friday from 10 to 5 and also Saturdays from 1 to 5. So I encourage you to take the opportunity to look at that collection. One of the other things that happened that was really cool at the public library is about 12 years after Charles Wertz's death in 1948, there was a librarian named Aurelia Huxall, and she took it upon herself. She had a master's degree in archaeology, and she created the Charles Wertz catalog. So Charles Wertz installed the cases and brought labels for a lot of this collection, and she numbered each piece that was in his collection, and she made descriptions of all of them, and if there was any provenance or idea of where these objects came from, she also entered that into the catalog. So this catalog was actually lost until 2016. So Madeline Wertz passed away in 2014. The contents of her house was gifted to the Portsmouth Salvation Army. And then in a couple years, they found this little metal box with catalog cards in it, and they realized the significance of what they had, that it was the catalog to Charles Wertz's portion of the collection. So in 2016, the Salvation Army gifted that catalog to the Southern Ohio Museum. So that is now part of our permanent archives. And the really cool thing about that is originally we knew that most of these objects were local, they were regional, but we didn't know exactly where they came from. So now, out of about 10,000 some objects, we now know where about 1,000 of them specifically were found. And what was kind of neat is it was unfortunate that we were closed down in 2020, but during that time, we were able to open up the cases and rearrange the exhibition and be able to put labeling in there that reflected the entries in the Charles Wertz catalog. Charles Wertz also wrote a manuscript in the 1930s about the prehistoric people and their works here in Scioto County, so we were able to combine information from his manuscript with the entries in the catalog, and we were actually able to add 7 archaeological sites to the Ohio database because of Charles Wertz and Aurelia Huxtall's research and recording. So I do have to thank Dr. Kurt Shoemaker, so he was very generous to be able to come in. I am in the process of finishing up a book on the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex because amazingly, it's the largest prehistoric earth and mound complex in the entire world, but it's been largely ignored by archaeologists. Part of that is because most of it is destroyed, but it's also mind-blowing that everybody's ignored it for this long. So in the process, I just wanted to put the catalog artifacts out there so people could look at them and see where they came from. But I also, during the process of doing that, realized that no one's ever really wrote the book on the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex before. So in order to put it into context, I've taken that upon myself, and I've been working on that for the last 2 years. I'm hoping to have that wrapped up pretty soon. But during that process, Lacey Davis came in and took photographs of the objects, and Dr. Shoemaker came in and brought his little magnifier and identified materials for us. So we now know where a lot of these materials come from, and the amazing part of it is that most of them aren't local. So these materials were obtained many hundreds of miles away from where they ended up here in Portsmouth, and it's just a testament to the civilizations that were here before us 2,000 years ago with their continental trade networks, and it just has yet to be really fully understood or acknowledged the level of civilization that was here in the Americas during that time period. And the Wertz collection is a testament that stands in significance of all of this. So I encourage you to take a few moments, check out the Wertz collection. The other thing that the museum is doing is we are growing our prehistoric Native American artifact collections. So adjacent to the Art of the Ancients gallery, we also have a focus gallery. So in that gallery right now, we have additional prehistoric Native American artifact collections from Scioto County that have been gifted to us here at the museum, and those are on display. Also, you'll find in the Wertz gallery, there is a map that I have put together of the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex. So there are a lot of sites in Kentucky that were not included here. I have been accused by the archaeologists of making a treasure map for the looters, but I would like to make it clear that their strategy of preservation, which was to keep all of this secret, has not really worked out so well. So it's my intention to make all of this information public so that we all know the significance and how special it is what we have left here, so that what is left of it we can work to preserve. And I have to definitely acknowledge the role of Ark of Appalachia in helping to preserve what we have left of the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex.
Very good.
Are there any radiometric dates for any of the features, or are there any astronomical alignments? And has there been any professional archaeology done on any of those things?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, lots of all the
So they have probably most of our radiocarbon dating has actually come from the Tremper Mound, and the original dates for the Tremper Mound was around 200 BC. They've done some more recent dates off of, I think, fabric pieces that they had in the collections at the OHC, and they had come up with about 80 and 150, so there's that range in time in there of the radiocarbon dates. Now, those are also estimates, So there's calibrations and things that go into radiocarbon dating that we can make an estimate to how old things are if we have organic material, but it is still an estimate. And then as far as professional archaeological work, there have been excavations at the Tremper Mound, at the Fort Mountain Village in Portsmouth. There's also excavation at the old Fort Earthwork, Portsmouth Group A. There's excavation at the Biggs Mound, Portsmouth Group D. And then there were also professional excavations done at the Hardin Village, which is also in South Shore. So there's been a decent amount of professional attention paid to it. Most of that was in the early 1900s, but there has been a little bit of renewed interest. Unfortunately, most of the archaeological work that's done today is done as what they call cultural resource management. So if there is public property that's going to be developed with federal dollars, the government requires the archaeologists to come in and at least watch what's going on in case there's artifacts or human remains that are disturbed. So there have been recent archaeological work done at Mountain Park. So in 2018, they did a cultural resource management survey of Mountain Park where they did a lot of geometric surveys, and then with the improvements that were put in, with Connects, they put in a walking path and some security cameras and lighting in Mountain Park. And during the process of that installation, they discovered over 5,000, or nearly 5,000 artifacts in Mountain Park. And those are now in the collections of the OHC, which we're not allowed to look
I'll just
at.
add to that of those 5,000 objects roughly that they found, they were not digging where they thought they would find stuff.
Yeah, they tried to avoid it.
They tried to lay out a path, and so they were really surprised by actually the large number of fragments and things like this. Like there's pottery shards, quartz crystal.
Yeah, the flint and bladelets were really interesting. It's all diagnostic material, they say, of the Hopewell culture. So it really tied, I mean, obviously the whole thing is reminiscent of Hopewell, just the earthworks alone, but they confirmed that by finding specific artifacts at Mountain Park.
So when they did that study, they in their report that they gave back to the city of Portsmouth, it did include an appendix that had some photographs of some of the items, and so we were able to put those in the Scioto Historical app for Mountain Park. So you can actually see some items, artifacts, or that are up in Columbus at the OAC. But because they gave us those photographs, gave the city of Portsmouth those photographs, that's how we were able to use them.
What was your third part to the question?
Astronomical alignment.
Astronomical alignment. So William Romaine works as an archaeologist and has done work on a lot of astrological alignments. Probably the most popular ones were at Serpent Mound. And so he has done some work on the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex, and you can actually look him up, William Romaine, and he's on academia.edu, and his book that he wrote is on there for free, so you can actually look at some of the alignments. So he's looked at the horseshoe mounds, and they have the north-south alignment. He's looked at the old Fort Earthwork, and it's where the central grand square of the old Fort Earthworks aligns with the cardinal directions. He thinks that the path of the southeast parallel embankments that lead through New Boston is aligned with the summer solstice. So these people had a lot of knowledge that they're not given credit for as far as astronomy and directions. And we don't know if exactly how they had all of that figured out, but it's certainly reflected in the design of the earthwork complexes that they created.
Is that in the app? Is that information in the app?
Romaine's work?
Yes.
Not expressly. I did not include any of his maps.
Those will all be in the book, though. He was very nice to allow me to include that.
Well, he was instrumental in showing us figuring out where the lines were that went from Portsmouth from Mountain Park to Sideline to the Temple Mound, but they didn't just cross the river, but they went up and followed the river and astronomically aligned place with the summer solstice. He's got that in his book, and he published a part about that.
Anybody else questions? Yes.
I read one time about 7 or 8 burials on the ridge next to Red Rock. I was wondering if you guys have any information on that.
I do not. I can tell you probably the most dramatic story about burials in the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex, and it tells you how tied the complex is in Kentucky and in Ohio. So there was a mound that was part of Portsmouth Group A, the old Fort Earthwork, and inside this mound they found sandstone slabs in a circle, and inside of that circle they found 22 headless skeletons. This was reported by Charles Wertz. Didn't quite have a date on when that happened or what happened to any of those people, no one knows. But 15 years later in New Boston at the Steelworks Mound, they found 22 heads. So I'm not going to speculate on what they were doing with that, but it's pretty dramatic to separate people's heads from their bodies over 4.5 miles on both sides of the Ohio River.
One more detail on that.
Yes.
I think that the skeletons that were found, the bones had been painted.
Oh yeah, they were covered with, they reported red, black, and yellow ochre.
So that, when they were placed in there, all the flesh had been removed and they were painted.
Yeah, it's a little bit gruesome.
So we can field questions, as we go on the tour. So again, thank you everybody for coming and help spread the word about the Portsmouth Earthworks Complex. Thank you.